Good evening and welcome to No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on a low-key but high-profile visit to India. Low-key because neither side wanted to formally announce it, and high-profile because it's the first time in over 2 years since the Ladakh standoff that a senior Chinese minister has come to India. Wang is expected to meet Foreign Minister Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval tomorrow. So why is this visit happening now when the border standoff still remains unresolved and when the world is focused on Ukraine? China is said to be keen for Prime Minister Modi to attend the BRICS summit in person later this year, but there could be other reasons as well. India has also made it clear though that it cannot be business as usual until the border issues are sorted out. Meanwhile, on the eve of his Delhi visit, the Chinese foreign minister was ticked off by India for remarks that he made in Pakistan on Wednesday regarding Jammu and Kashmir. India's statement was unusually strong because it named Wang Yi and also made a point to say that India normally refrains from public judgment on China's internal issues. Before coming to Delhi, Wang Yi was in Pakistan and he flew to Kabul today for a surprise visit, the first by a top Chinese official since the Taliban took over in August last year. Meanwhile, speaking at a college event earlier today in Delhi, Foreign Minister Jaishankar said diplomatic interactions with China are ongoing and that few would have anticipated the turn of India-China ties in the last few years.
Few would have anticipated, for example, the turn that India's relations with China have taken in the last 2 years. Any prudent policy, therefore, backs its posture with capabilities and deterrence. A big responsibility of Indian diplomacy, therefore, is to create the widest set of options for such contingencies. This could mean acquisition of defense capabilities and other supportive measures, or securing the understanding for our policies and actions from the international community. Where China was concerned, the diplomatic interactions that are going on in parallel to the military standoff since May 2020 illustrate that foreign and defense policies are really joined at the hip. The leveraging of a multipolar world has been particularly visible in terms of weapons and technologies needed by our defense forces. That a Rafale aircraft acquisition from France can take place at the same time as that of an MH-60R helicopter or a P-8 aircraft from the United States, the S-400 missile system from Russia, or the spice bombs from Israel, speak volumes of our nimbleness.
And joining us first on No Spin tonight is India's former Foreign Secretary, also former Ambassador to China, Ms. Nirupama Rao. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rao, for joining us today. Just to get your take on why this visit is happening at this particular time. And, you know, it's been very unusual because both sides didn't announce it in advance. Why do you think that is?
Thank you, Nidhi, for having me on the show. I think there could be a number of reasons why this visit is taking place at this moment. And my own experience is that typically the Chinese indulge in very choreographed diplomatic maneuvers, and this is one of them. It's their style and their mode of behavior. So you see Wang Yi venturing forth into Pakistan, into Afghanistan, now India, tomorrow, and then Nepal. And I think the impression that the Chinese, if you were speaking from a Chinese perspective, it's to speak about China, the rising power, the risen power rather, confident, active, focused, even though there is geopolitical uncertainty in the world today with chaos and conflict surrounding us, especially when you look at Ukraine. But engaging neighbors, a so-called force for stability and good, even though the reality may be otherwise. Secondly, I think the Chinese see an opening in this situation. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, as seen from Beijing, offers the scope for new alignments that must be explored, especially if they can disturb the architecture of the Indo-Pacific and the architecture that is led by the United States and its allies and partners. Now, I see India as a key and central power in this calculus because India has been careful not to condemn Russia or pin its colors to the Western mast. It's a country that powers like China and by extension Russia, of course, would like to see co-opted to their side, or at least be seen as identifying more with their sphere of interest, although I don't believe, again, that India can be co-opted so easily.
Right, which is why the next question was that,
But I just wanted to give you the third reason also before I go on to that. Thirdly, I think the Chinese want to see the current situation, want to use the current situation so that they can pin and perhaps probe India a little more on the future of bilateral relations. Here again, they want to move away from our emphasis on resolving the conflict, the current standoff that is in Ladakh, and our emphasis on the restoration of the status quo before 2020. The Chinese preference is to move on to a wider canvas of business as usual in bilateral relations, allowing for a resumption of the so-called normal relationship.
Given that India has actually only recently reiterated this position, both Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla and the Prime Minister in his meeting with the Australian Prime Minister a few days ago, reiterating India's red lines that you have to resolve this border standoff before it can be business as usual. Therefore, is this visit a good idea, or in diplomacy, is it always good to keep a window open?
Well, diplomacy in the classic sense of the word is about keeping windows open. But whether the Chinese practice classic diplomacy as we know it, or, they see everything from the perspective of, as I said, their risen sense of power and their constant propensity to try and make use of every opening there is to push, to probe. And if they don't encounter too much of a resistance, to literally use the bayonets to go in further. So I would see this attempt or this visit by Wang Yi as very carefully choreographed, as I said earlier, looking at the neighborhood, seeing India's position on it, looking at the manner in which the Russia-Ukraine conflict is evolving, the new geopolitics surrounding that conflict.
But do you believe that India should remain firm?
To see if some openings can be made with India.
But do you think India should remain firm on its position that you have to resolve these friction points in Ladakh first, where we've made only little headway, frankly, in the last couple of years? Should India stick to that? Should the Prime Minister commit to going to BRICS at all until that's resolved?
Well, I'm not privy to what the decision-making in New Delhi will be about this, but I would see a lot of reason and definitely it being in our interest to maintain this position that the status quo prior to 2020 should be restored in the relationship, because the Chinese have disturbed that status quo, and the relationship, the complete absence of mutual trust in the relationship is because of these Chinese actions. And we have taken that position. That is a statement of policy on our part, and I don't think we can deviate from that policy very easily.
Finally, Nirupama Rao, when you look at, the way the MEA reacted so strongly to Wang Yi's statement on China, on Jammu and Kashmir in Islamabad yesterday, it was unusual, as I was pointing out, because they named him, and also that they said that India normally doesn't talk publicly about China's internal matters. It was kind of a warning in a sense. Does that give you a sense that, the expectations from this visit should be kept really very low?
Yes, I think we should be very realistic about our expectations from this visit. China has not acted maturely or responsibly. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that China has been extremely flat-footed in those references that Wang Yi made in Islamabad to Kashmir and the Kashmir situation. So I don't really quite understand what expectations China can have about restoring normalcy in the relationship with India, given this kind of approach that it has taken.
All right, Ambassador Nirupama Rao, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that big story. And joining us on No Spin tonight, we're happy to have with us Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha. He was the former Chief of the Integrated Defence Staff and Commander-in-Chief of the Western Naval Command. Also with us, Indrani Bagchi, CEO Designate of the Ananta Aspen Centre, and Dr. Tara Kartha, who is now a Distinguished Fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Dr. Tara Kartha, to you first. What do you think the objectives of the Chinese are with this visit? Do you think, in a sense, as perhaps Nirupama Rao was also suggesting, that they're looking to kind of ally with India on Russia at this time when, pretty much the rest of the world has ganged up against it?
I think that's a pretty good conclusion we can arrive at, considering his words in the OIC conference. That was the first time he attended such a conference. And if you see what he said, it is a lot, it's pretty compelling stuff. He's saying we don't subscribe to the international, that certain values are okay, certain systems are good, there are other alternative systems, all of which played very well into the OIC Charter. Now, that is one. And we've already said that we can't have business as usual. Like you said, there was a very strong reaction to Kashmir. But we, under BRICS, you mentioned BRICS, there is recently they launched a vaccine R&D center, and our health officials attended that workshop. The foreign secretary met with Wang Yi in Dushanbe. He met him on the sidelines of SCO. That is also going on. So when we say there is no business as usual, yeah, that is a very good point, because you can't do this to us and say, everything is fine. But there is also what we ourselves call issue-based diplomacy, right? So if there is, we've just had somebody from the Victoria Nuland coming and telling us, trying to persuade us in a certain way. So I think it's as well to hear what the Chinese foreign minister has to say.
Right. Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Gautam Bambawale, India's former ambassador to China, actually wrote a pretty strong piece a couple of days ago that, India should not yield from its position on ensuring that the Ladakh issue is resolved first and its status quo is restored first. Would you broadly agree with that? That India needs to stick to that and not allow business as usual to happen with China?
Thank you, Nidhi, for inviting me on this show. I think it will remain on the Indian MEA's agenda. It should be the first one, and I'm sure that it will be like that. But at the same time, there are 2 points that I want to make, having accepted what you said. There's this gentleman called Hu Shisheng. He is the director of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Now, what he says that, China sees a bit of convergence with India as far as the Ukraine-Russia war is concerned, because both of them have not openly criticized Russia. And that is one area where they feel that possibly this talk will come, and between two of them they can have out-of-box thinking. So that is number one. How much will India sort of go along with this is only time will tell. The second point that I feel, the China's economy is on the rise. In fact, in the last quarter, it has gone up by 4%, and it has crossed, the manufacturing has crossed $3.854 trillion. China sees itself, it wants to position itself as a world leader, and therefore it has to make sure that the talking terms with everybody should be around. How much do we talk? I think it is only time will tell it. Tomorrow we will get to know. But one thing is for sure, that we will listen to them, and when it comes to our turn, India will certainly take that stand of there will be no business as usual. Fine, we have heard you what you said. That it doesn't mean that we agree to it, but certainly,
Right.
this is two points.
Right. One of the things, Dr. Tarakartha, that Gautam Bambawale, the former envoy to China, has argued is that India actually needs to take more steps in order to show Beijing that we are serious. We are not going to be, a pushover when it comes to the border issue. And he said, for example, that we need to reduce our dependence on pharmaceuticals that are imported from China. We need to get more Chinese companies to exit from India. Would you agree with that? Are these more aggressive steps that India needs to take? And what did you think of the fact that the MEA for the first time seemed to hint that India actually may make a public statement about China's, internal issues, so-called, such as, we know what that means. That means Taiwan, it means Hong Kong, it means Tibet.
I think taking the Kashmir issue first, the statement which he apparently made in the OIC meeting is like Ambassador Nirupma Rao said, is very flat-footed, is very surprising. But if you look at the foreign ministry's readout, there is no mention of Kashmir at all, of the OIC thing. There is absolutely nothing. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to read that. But I think the MEA reaction was very, very good. I mean, you need to say this, that use, and to get us tough on this aspect. Should we then now further sanctions, not sanctions or blacklist Chinese companies? No, not yet. Not yet. Because it's easy to say that we should have a strong position. But then right now we are going to find problems with the sanctions on Russia. There's all this stuff taking place. And the economy we've done a fantastic job in exports this year. But then it's not yet time. I think we need to sort of see, like we said, let's see, China is probably on, from what he said at OIC, it seems to be a mission on how to win friends and influence people. That's what he seems to be doing. So let's hear what he has to say. Do we back up on Ladakh? No. But for the moment, let's at least go that way, because China is also hurting on the sanctions. It's going to hurt more, and so will we. It's going to hurt this. It's not just oil. In multiple areas, we're going to face a lot of problems. So let's wait and see.
Kristina, also just a quick comment on how China has reacted to the Quad this last week, calling it as dangerous as NATO's expansion in the east of Europe. How does India reconcile its position, on one hand being an important member of the Quad, although it's been very independent in how it has moved on its foreign policy choices, but on the other hand, this sort of very aggressive Chinese stand on the Quad itself?
I think, if China criticizes Quad, it obviously means that China is really worried about it. It worries them a lot. And therefore, India does not have to make any other statement or take any other stand other than what it has taken so far. And the Chinese will worry, because they sense that, these four countries are all democracies and very powerful. If they come together, China is happy to deal bilaterally with any country. But four countries coming together, it really worries them, because the Chinese can't take on these four countries' might. Whether it is economic might or military might, it's not going to be easy for China at all. And therefore, I think that Indian stand so far on the Quad has been absolutely balanced and very calculated. And I don't think that we should deviate from this at all.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tarakartha and Vice Admiral Sheikh Hasina, for joining us, giving us some perspective on that important story. It will be interesting to see how the Chinese foreign minister's visit to India actually plays out and what is announced.